The cold metal floor beneath Captain Elias Ward's body felt like ice. He opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the soft blue glow of the alien walls. Strange symbols flickered above him. His head throbbed, and his limbs felt heavy, like someone had poured lead into his bones. As he sat up, he realized he was not on his ship anymore. He was deep inside the heart of an alien vessel, the Zyrene royal flagship known across galaxies. For capturing enemies who dared challenge their empire, Elias had expected pain. He had expected machines, torture, and questions. But what he got instead was silence. Guards with smooth silver armor and glowing eyes stood at attention outside his cell. The air was thick with tension, as if the entire ship was holding its breath. Then the door opened. She entered. Queen Nicira, ruler of the Zyrene, stepped forward like a shadow made of light. Her long robes flowed behind her like liquid starlight, her eyes violet and sharp, locked onto Ilias's. She was known across star systems, not only for her power, but for her coldness. She had conquered 20 planets without stepping foot on their soil. Yet now, she stood face to face with a single human. She didn't shout, she didn't threaten. She simply asked in a voice soft like wind over glass, "Why do your kind resist? Us, even in the face of certain defeat?" Elias stared at her. His face was bruised, his lip cracked, but his eyes were steady. He took a slow breath. In that moment, he didn't see a queen. He saw a being that had never heard the truth before. He answered, "Because we remember what freedom tastes like." The words floated in the air between them. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Not even the guards moved. Something shifted in the queen's eyes. She had expected fear. She had expected pride. But freedom? She hadn't thought of that word. In centuries, no one had ever spoken to her like that. NYS Era turned away, her expression unreadable. But deep inside, something unfamiliar stirred out. Could one man's answer really hold such weight? Elias remained seated, his body aching, but his spirit unbroken. He had seen friends die. He had watched Earth burn in places. But his soul, the one thing the Zyrene couldn't touch, was still his own. And in that moment, without weapons or power, he had given the queen something she had never faced before, a reason to question herself. She looked at him once more and said nothing. Then she left, her long robe trailing behind her like a comet tail. The guards followed in silence, their faces hidden, but their pace uncertain. For the first time, their queen hadn't given them commands after a meeting. Elias leaned back against the wall, breathing slowly. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know if he'd survive. But he knew one thing: the seed of doubt had been planted. Not in a soldier, not in a machine, but in the mind of an empress, who had never been told no, and sometimes one word, one moment, was all it took to change the stars. Captain Elias Ward sat quietly in the strange glowing cell. The walls changed colors slowly: blue, green, violet, like a living dream. But he wasn't afraid. He had survived far worse on Earth. He had seen cities fall, heard the last words of dying soldiers, and still chosen to stand. Now, even in this alien prison, he carried that same strength inside him. Every morning, same Zyrene guards came and took him to a chamber filled with soft light and floating orbs. There Queen Nicira waited not with weapons or threats, but with questions. She sat tall on her crystal-like throne. Her voice was calm, without anger. She asked about Earth, about humans, about their history. Why do you build cities in the sky? Why do you keep fighting wars even when peace is possible? She asked. Elias didn't lie. He told her everything about Earth's wars, victories, mistakes, and the people who never gave up. He spoke with honesty, not to impress her, but because truth was the only thing left that the Zyrene hadn't taken from him. But something strange began to happen. The Zyrene had advanced, technology that could read thoughts. Their telepaths had broken the minds of generals and spies before, but not Elias. Every time they tried to scan him, they failed. His thoughts were like fog deep, layered, and unreadable. One telepath even collapsed after trying to reach into his memories, his mind. It is like fire wrapped in silence, she whispered before losing consciousness. The queen was confused. You are just one human. Why can't we understand? You? Elias gave a small smile. Maybe it's not that you can't. Maybe it's that you never tried to see us as people. The words struck her. The Zyrene believed themselves to be above all. They studied stars and bent space. But Elias, without any weapon, had made her question their way of thinking. She started to visit him even outside the questioning hours. Sometimes she only watched him. Sometimes she asked about human art, music, or family. One day she asked, "What does love mean to your people?" Elias closed his eyes for a moment. A memory came to him, a rainy day, a little girl on his shoulders, and his sister's laughter. In the air, love is what keeps us alive when nothing else is left, he said. It's what makes us fight for others, even if we lose ourselves. Nicera did not respond. She looked down at her hands as if trying to understand a feeling she had never known. Her empire had been built on fear and control. But this man, alone and powerless, spoke of something greater than power, something she had no weapon against. Her council grew worried. Rumors spread through the ship. The queen was spending too much time with the human. General Tharnax warned her, "He is not special. He is dangerous." But Nicera didn't listen. She felt something strange when she spoke to Elias. Not fear. Not hate, but curiosity. He wasn't trying to destroy her. He was just trying to be understood. One night, as the stars passed slowly outside the ship's glass wall, Nicera stood alone, thinking about everything he had said. She whispered. To herself, his mind cannot be read. But his words reach me. Elias sat in his cell that same night, watching the lights on the ceiling. He didn't know what the queen felt. He didn't even know if he would live another day. But something had changed. He could feel it in the way the guards looked at him. In the silence after each session, the Zyrene had captured his body. But now, without knowing it, they had opened their minds. Whispers filled the halls of the Zyrene royal ship. Soldiers and noble advisors spoke in low voices, careful not to be heard. Something unusual was happening. Queen Nicera was spending more time with the human captive than with her own council. That had never happened before. The Zyrene were proud, cold beings. They didn't trust outsiders. And they never ever valued a prisoner's words. But the queen had changed. She no longer spoke with sharp orders. Her voice, once hard like crystal, now held a softness no one had heard before. She asked questions. She paused to listen. It frightened the court more than war ever had. General Tharnax, tall, brutal warrior with dark silver skin and burning red eyes, was the first to speak out. He had led the Zyrene armies across countless galaxies, crushing resistance under his command. Now he stood in the queen's war chamber, his voice heavy with anger. "This human," he growled, "is poison in your mind. He speaks weakness, and weakness invites death." Nicera looked at Tharnax calmly. "Oh, you know," she said. "He speaks truth." The council stared in silence. No one had ever challenged Tharnax before. But the queen had. Tharnax stepped forward. "What truth can come from a race that crawled in mud only a few thousand years ago?" "They are emotional, loud, and unpredictable," Nicera replied, her voice firm but quiet, "and yet they fight when they have nothing left. They laugh even. In pain that is not weakness, General, it is something we have forgotten." Elias, locked in his cell, didn't know what was happening above, but he felt something different in the air. The guards no longer looked at him like an animal. One of them, a young Zyrene with soft blue skin, paused one morning and asked, "Do you really believe emotions make you strong?" Elias nodded. "Yes. They give us something to hold on to, even when everything else is gone." The guard didn't reply. He just walked away. But slower than usual, his mind clearly full of questions. Meanwhile, Queen Nicera continued her visits. She asked Elias about hope, dreams, and faith. Elias told her about Earth's past, how people once lived in darkness, how they invented light. He told her about people who sacrificed everything for others they had never met. He told her that strength wasn't just in muscle or machines, but in the heart that refuses to break. Each word shook Nicera more than any battle ever had. But trouble was growing. Tharnax began secretly gathering his own loyalists. He believed the queen had gone too far. He told his followers, if we do not stop her, she will lead us into ruin. This human will break our empire from the inside. Back in her private chambers, Nicera stood in front of a tall mirror. She no longer recognized her own reflection. Was she truly changing? Or was Elias only helping her see who she had always been? One night, as Elias sat in his cell, the door opened without warning. Nicera stepped in, alone. She stood silently. For a moment, then asked softly, "Do you hate us for what we've done to your people?" Elias looked up. His voice was calm. "No, I don't hate, but I remember." Nicera's eyes shimmered with something she couldn't name. Regret? Pain? Or perhaps the beginning of something new. As she left, she whispered, more to herself than to him, then maybe. Remembering is where change begins, far above in. The frozen halls of the Zyrene court, fire had begun to glow not from weapons, but from a single human soul that refused to be silenced. A soft hum filled the chamber as Queen Nicera stood beside a glowing pedestal. Floating above it was a smooth, crystal-like orb of memory sphere. It was a sacred Zyrene device that allowed anyone to relive a chosen memory, like stepping into the past. Only the highest minds were permitted to use it. For most, it was used to study great battles or moments of power. But today, Nicera offered it to a human. Captain Elias Ward stood in front of her, confused. "What is this?" he asked quietly. "A window into your own memory," she said. "You may choose one. Any moment from your life, and I will see it with you." Elias hesitated. He had many memories, some filled with pain, others with pride. He could have shown her the battlefield, where he survived a hopeless war, or the time he received Earth's highest medal. But instead he chose something small, something personal. He placed his hand on the sphere, and the room changed. Suddenly, they were standing inside a small, warm room on Earth. It was raining outside. A younger Elias sat beside a hospital bed. On the bed was an old woman, his mother frail, but smiling. Her hand held his tightly, even though she could barely move. "I'm proud of you," she whispered in the memory. "No matter what happens out there, promise me you'll never let the world harden your heart." The younger Elias nodded, tears in his eyes. "I promise." Nicera watched in silence. There was no war here, no speeches, no flags, just a mother saying goodbye. It's a son holding on to her final words like they were more important than the stars. When the memory faded, the room returned to normal. But something inside Nicera had shifted. She had lived for over 200 years. She had seen planets fall, stars explode, and enemies beg for mercy. But she had never seen love like that, kind that was quiet, pure, and full of strength. She didn't speak for a long time. Elias looked at her. "I could have shown you war," he said, "but I thought this might say more about who we are." Nicera turned away, trying to hide the emotion in her face. "You chose a dying woman's last words." "Why?" "Because those words made me who I am," he replied. "And they're the reason I still believe in hope, even now." The queen stood frozen. Her empire was built on control, fear, and silence. But Elias's memory showed her something she had never ruled with love and sacrifice. For the first time in her life, Nicera felt unsure, not because of a weapon, not because of a threat, but because she was beginning to understand something that could not be measured or controlled the human soul. Outside the chamber, the ship moved through stars. But inside, something far greater was happening. A wall was breaking between two beings from different worlds, not with force, but with. Feeling later that night, Nicera stood alone in her private room. She touched the glass wall, looking at the stars outside. "A memory," she whispered, "stronger than 1,000 soldiers." Elias, back in his cell, sat quietly with his hands folded. He didn't know if Nicera had changed, but he knew she had seen something real, something that could not be ignored, and sometimes a single true moment. could be the beginning of everything. The stars outside the Zyrene flagship continued to shine, but inside darkness was growing. General Tharnax had seen enough. In his eyes, Queen Nicera had gone too far. She was no longer acting like a ruler, but like a dreamer. And worse, she was listening to a human. Whispers of rebellion had turned into quiet meetings. Tharnax gathered loyal commanders in secret. His voice was strong and sharp. The queen is no longer thinking like a Zyrene. She has allowed emotion to guide her. This is not leadership, it is weakness. He showed them files. Earth was still rising in resistance. Humans were regrouping, planning to fight back. Tharnax used this as proof. She hesitates while they prepare for war. We must act before it's too late. The plan was simple and deadly. Tharnax took control of the ship's central command system. With his override codes, he targeted Earth's largest remaining city for destruction. One orbital strike, and millions would die. He knew it would push the queen to choose her throne or her prisoner. Meanwhile, Queen Nicera felt the shift. Her guards avoided her eyes. Her generals gave short, cold answers. Something was wrong, and in her heart, she knew it led back to Elias. She went to his cell one last time. He was sitting on the floor, eyes closed, as if in deep thought. When he heard the door open, he looked up. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked quietly. Nicera didn't deny it. "Tharnax has taken control. He's preparing to fire on your planet." Elias stood slowly, and stopped him. The queen's face tightened. "If I try, I may lose everything, my army, my people, even my life." Ilias stepped closer, his voice calm but strong. "Then maybe it's time to choose what kind of queen you want to be. A ruler of fear or a leader of hope." Nicera looked at him. A weight of centuries pressed down on her. For years she had ruled with strength and silence. But now, in front of her stood a man with nothing, yet somehow he still held power, not over ships, but over hearts. "Why did your kind never bow to us?" she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. Ilias's eyes met hers. "Because every time we fell, we chose to rise. That was our answer to the universe. Right. Deeper than any weapon." She didn't speak again. She turned and left, her steps firm and full of fire. As Nicera entered the control chamber, guards tried to stop her. She raised her hand. A surge of energy lit up the room as her royal code shattered the override. Alarms screamed. The countdown to Earth's destruction paused. Tharnax appeared on the screen, eyes wide with fury. "You've betrayed your own bloodline." Nicera stood tall. "No, General. I've remembered what we forgot. Strength without compassion is only fear-wearing armor." Tharnax's image disappeared. But his final words echoed through the chamber, then prepare for civil war. Back in his cell, Elias heard the alarms fall silent. The attack had stopped. He didn't smile, but he closed his eyes and whispered, "She chose." At that moment, 2 guards entered. One of them, the younger Zyrene soldier, unlocked the cell. "Come," he said. "The queen has summoned you. Not as a prisoner, but as a guest." Elias stepped out, heart heavy but hopeful. Storm was coming, but for the first time. Fight would not be between enemies, but between old ways and new truths. And at the center of it all stood a queen, still stunned by a simple human answer. Flashing lights filled the corridors of the Zyrene flagship. Emergency sirens echoed like distant thunder. Soldiers rushed through the halls, unsure who to follow, Queen Nicera or General Tharnax, who had now declared himself the true ruler of the Empire. The civil war had begun. Queen Nicera had stopped the destruction of Earth, but it had come at a great cost. Tharnax had taken control of most of the fleet. Loyal commanders were being arrested. Now Nicera herself was under threat. The woman who once ruled 1,000 systems without question was now hunted in her own ship. She had only a handful of guards left. One of them, the young soldier who once questioned Elias, helped her escape into the hidden tunnels deep within the ship. There, away from the cameras, she met with Elias. He was no longer a prisoner. He stood beside her, not in chains, but in quiet strength. "I stopped the weapon," she said, breathing heavily. But Tharnax won't stop. He's turning everything. We built into fear again. Elias looked at her with steady eyes. Then let's give your people something stronger to believe in. Together, they made a plan. Elias had learned about the ship's systems during his time in captivity. With the help of a few loyal engineers, he could break into the communication array, a powerful system that could send a message across the empire. They didn't have soldiers, they didn't have ships, but they had a voice. As the battle outside grew louder, Elias and Nicera reached the heart of the ship. Alarms blared. Lights flickered, but they kept moving. Side by side, human and Zirain. Finally, Elias stood before the glowing console. He took a breath, then looked at Nicera. Are you sure? Asked. She nodded. Do what your kind does best. Peek from the heart. Elias activated the system, across the Zirain Empire, on warships, on city screens, in training camps, and control towers. His face appeared. He spoke clearly. His voice filled with emotion, not anger. My name is Elias Ward. I am a human from a world you tried to break. But I have seen something greater than war. I have seen your queen choose compassion over fear. I have seen her protect life, not destroy it. And I ask you not as a soldier, but as a soul, look into your hearts. Ask yourselves what kind of future you want. One ruled by fear, or one shaped by truth. The message ended. There was silence, then whispers, then change. Across the empire, some Zyrene lowered their weapons. Some soldiers refused to follow Tharnax's orders. The message didn't win every mind, but it won enough. Tharnax, furious, stormed the control room. He found Elias and Nicera. They are standing together. You've doomed us, he shouted. Yes. This softness will destroy everything. Nicera stepped forward, calm and tall. No, it will rebuild everything we lost. Tharnax charged, but before he could strike, a group of guards, once his loyal followers, blocked his path. They had seen Elias's message. They had listened. And they had made a choice. Tharnax was taken into custody. The war ended, not with fire, but with a message, a voice that dared to speak of hope. Elias, bleeding from a wound he got during the escape, leaned against the wall. Nicera held his hand gently. Why did you help me? She asked. He smiled weakly. Because once someone held my hand when I was broken. Now it was my turn. Nicera looked at him with eyes full of something new, not power, not pride, but respect, and far above, in the stars, a silent promise was born, one of peace, truth, and change. Peace had never been quiet in the Zyrene Empire. It had always come through power, through silence, forced by fear. But now, after centuries of ruling through control, Queen Nicera stood before her people not as a conqueror, but as a leader. Willing to change, the civil war had ended. General Tharnax was in chains, and the fire of rebellion had turned into soft light. Ships stopped firing. Soldiers laid down their weapons. And across the empire, a new feeling was growing: curiosity. In hope, Queen Nicera made a bold decision. She called for something that had never been done in Zyrene history, a peace treaty with Earth. Many still doubted her. Some called her weak. But when she stood on the grand stage of her capital world, with Captain Elias Ward beside her, the galaxy watched in silence. Elias wore no armor, no medals. He stood in simple clothes, a bandage still on his arm. But to the crowd, he looked stronger than any general. He'd survived their prisons, changed their queen, and still spoke with humility. Nicera raised her voice so all could hear. For too long we ruled by force. But today, we choose something greater. We choose understanding. Elias stepped forward and spoke next. His voice was calm and full of heart. This is not the end of our story. This is the beginning. May look different, live different, even think different. In the end, we all want the same thing, a future worth living for. As their hands met and the treaty was signed, the crowd remained silent at first. Then slowly, a sound rose, soft, unsure, and then louder, applause, across the stars, The moment was broadcast. On Earth, people watched with tears in their eyes. In Zyrene cities, children pointed at the screen and asked, "Is that the human who changed the queen's heart?" Yes, it was. Later, in a quiet garden behind the palace, Elias sat on a stone bench, watching the strange alien sky. Nicira walked over and sat beside him. "You've changed everything," she said. Elias shook his head. "No, you did. You chose to listen." She looked at him, thoughtful. "If our places had been reversed, would you have listened to me?" Elias gave a small smile. "No, I would have spoken too much, but eventually I would have listened." Both laughed softly. For a moment, they were not queen and captive, not alien and human. Just two souls who had found a strange, powerful friendship in the middle of war. Nicira turned serious. "You taught me something no weapon ever could. That strength doesn't live in control, it lives in courage and kindness." Elias looked up at the stars, and in remembering the small things, like a promise to your mother, or the way someone believes in you when no one else does. Silence sat between them, but it wasn't cold. It was peaceful. Later, as Elias prepared to return to Earth, the ship waited for him, its engines glowing softly. Nicira stood by the ramp, her guards around her, but no longer standing between them. "Will we meet again?" she asked. Elias smiled. "I think we already did. In the moment you chose to care." She nodded. No more words were needed. As the ship rose into the sky, Elias looked down at the Zyrene world. A place that had once been full of fear, now holding a small light of change. He had come as a prisoner. He was leaving as a symbol of peace. And far behind him, the alien queen stood still, watching the stars forever changed by the answer of one human captive.